Thank you. So I'm Romain David. I'm from the EOSC Task Force on Fair Metrics and Data Qualities. That is working for two years now, a bit more. I'm from European Research Infrastructure. I'm a data steward and scientist on ERINHA, that is European Research Infrastructure on Highly Pathogenic Agents. That is a biosafety level 4 laboratory federation. And we are working on fair data because we want to compare and to interoperate our facilities. So I thanks Chris Schubert and Mark Wilkinson that have prepared this presentation. So sorry if I have some misunderstanding too of this presentation, but it is a kind of presentation of what we have to face in this fair metrics part of the task force. So as you have seen several times before, fair principles are a set of principles to ensure that data are shared in a way that enables and enhances reuse by both human and machines. That means that there are some characteristics that we have to take in account when we want to measure how to assess the fair implementations. So what the principles didn't do, they do not suggest any specific technology, standard, or implementation solution. So they are technology agnostic, and the principles are not themselves a standard or a specification. That's from the paper of Wilkinson in 2016. And these high-level principles will enable a broad range of integrative and exploratory behavior based on the wide range of technology choice on implementation. So there are a large degree of freedom for them. So we know that in Horizon 2020, fair data management plan templates are provided, and there are some precision about the fair principles that are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and do not necessarily suggest any specific technology and standards. But there is a contrast because we need to assess the fair implementation, and projects that do not specify fair conditions for data should not be eligible for funding. So that's a trap because we don't know how to assess and to compare projects about that. And often the resolution of that is there is a declaration of researchers that say that their data are fair, but why do they claim that? Because they said, and we have nothing to answer. So it could stay like that a long time. So fair assessments, it's cottage industry. We suffer from abundance of fair assessment and fair assessment initiatives due to this mandatory requirement from Europe. For instance, we have 23 independent fair assessment platforms. See, they are available on fairassist.org, and most are questionnaire-based, and several of them are automated. I've seen that in several presentations before. Sorry to repeat that. And the outputs cannot really be compared to another one. For instance, we have published, the task force has published a paper comparing some results, and for some of them, we have seen that some pass the test with 20 under 22 as a note, and the other note was 2 under 24. So a big difference and discrepancy between all the tools. So which one is correct? Obviously, often the one that gives you the best score, but in the case of European requirement, it's not a game that we can play. So will this satisfy reviewers? Will this satisfy agency, journal editors? Will this satisfy business who want to purchase tools, software that claim to be fair? In this task force, so we have to try to discriminate what is feasible or not on the with a machine readable aspect or human readable aspect, and to propose recommendation for EOSC through the Fair Metrics and Data Quality Task Force with that is led by Mark Wilkinson, also Sarah, but now it's Chris Schubert. And some member of the task force are here. I've seen a message of Susanna that could correct or complete me at the end of the presentation. So the EOS Fair Working Group recommendation on fair metrics for EOS are to support the definition and implementation of evaluation tools, their thorough assessment of and evaluation, including inclusiveness, comparison of tools, manual and automated, and identification of their bias. That's an important aspect, and applicability in many different contexts, including thematic ones. So we have checked implementation of metrics to establish what are the quantitative criteria, but also the qualitative criteria and measure tools. I've cited some of them here, but there are many others. So exploring the problem of was done during a workshop with creator of all automated fair assessment tools, and discussed on the base of for the difference in fair measurement. We have decided that the complexity of metadata discovery and harvesting was the most critical problem, and they each did it differently, and it was impossible so to compare tests when they are testing different substrates. What is a substrate? The problem of metadata discovery and interpretation. I will give you one or two examples, but there are many others. I've heard about what is rich metadata before. We could talk about, for instance, in rich metadata, you can hear something like sufficient. If you have plenty of field after, are they well filled? For instance, is it an appropriate metadata? If you define colors, are all the colors in your metadata field? And for something more trivial, like that seems more trivial, like identifiers, you can have many ways to identify a resource that could arrive to a kind of well-structured file, or kind of landing page with lots of elements that are not always all machine readable. And in this page, you have embedded metadata from different kind of formats that could call different kind of ontologies. This is based on HTML typed links. If the alternative keyword is used with the type attribute, it indicates that the reference document is a reformulation of the current document in the specified format. So you have a multiplicity of this kind of descriptors, and they must be compatible, and it's not often the case, and they must show what are the difference between them, but it's not often the case, so there are some ambiguity of them. So too many sources of ambiguity are in each fair principles measurements. For instance, the metadata harvested are so to guess what to do at many steps. There is an overlap between the datasite sourced metadata and Zenodo metadata, for instance, and the use of typed links is ambiguity. The interpretation of the landing page itself is ambiguous. We have seen that some DOE resolve directly to data. This is one resolve to a landing page. And what then does the DOI represent? It could be the landing page or the data themselves. There is no way to support providers' sourced metadata, and it's the most important stuff. So that is just one example of one criterion in one case, but that could be applied in several formats and several cases, considering the metadata, the license, the protocol, etc., etc. So an harmonized approach is needed. We need to define a metadata publishing paradigm that will support all publishers, both large and small, and support the agents that are exploring them to be unambiguous. That is not trivial, even if you have not a large perimeter, and work on all type of digital objects. So it's not only traditional data that are numbers, but also software, workflows, and other numerical purpose. So we have to provide access to the most important metadata that comes from the data creator often. So to try to make decisions from the EOSC workshop and hackathon, we have the task force has written papers that is fair assessment tools toward an apples to apples comparison with fair posting, semi-posting the focus. Three things are necessary for successful transversal of fair records. It's unambiguous identification of the globally unique identifier for the record, but also for the metadata record and for the data record. And using the well-established technology of links, we define the subset of link relation types that can address these three requirements. So the workshop attendees. Another example about fair signposting. Link relations used by fair signposting can be cited as, described by, item, and this link can appear in the body of the HTML, the typed links, and the header of the HTTP message, link headers. Therefore, can be used on both web page and as well on non-HTML digital object. So it could be a file before added, linked with another or the same identifier, it depends, or a sub-identifier. So we can have the starting point from a web search, a bookmark, DOI resolution, or other ID resolution. I've shown the page, for instance, and the purpose of the landing page is now unambiguous. It is a broker pointing at all other entities required by a fair record. Lots of debates about fair data points are converging to this kind of view after more precise, more precision to be added in recommendations. So better yet, there is finally an unambiguous way to support a data provider on contextual metadata about the records they have deposited. And here I'm pointing to a metadata record published using the newly established true rate specification. So we can see that there are non-ambiguous but different kind of links. We can do the same thing without a landing page through links header, those supporting all kinds of digital objects. But that means, okay, how do we assess that? So we have 34 benchmark tests with positive examples and negative examples that we can use to change the various metadata harvesting flows to ensure that they truly are all working in exactly the same way. the first step in harmonization of fair assessment. So what do we see in the fair future? We have written a common paper on governance of fairness assessment that is available on Zenodo. You can see the header here. And there are some personal opinions shared by Chris and Mark here. So there is a lot of stake for fair stakeholders. They will be judged on their fairness. Therefore, we need fair to fulfill its original objective of being professional, to ensure it is considered trustworthy, objective, valid, and achievable. So this, we need to agree on some form of governance. And the EOSC Task Force on Fair Metrics and Data Quality has just issued a white paper describing the proposed governance model for fair assessment, and an invitation to join the founding stakeholders group that will establish the charter and continuity plan for a fairness assessment governance body is proposed and available on the EOSC website. So what could the fair governance look like? Quickly, top-down, what is the top? Who will be trusted arm's-length third party with sufficient knowledge? If it's bottom-up, is it community-driven? Stakeholder-driven? Stakeholders have vested interests. Will they sufficiently agree? Isn't that what we already have? Or is it mixed, based on, for instance, W3C models with open but members weighted new membership, or only testing? Is it enough to govern only the assessment testing aspect for fair? Do the principles themselves need governance? So the Fair for Research skills process suggests existing principles. Research software, sorry. Process suggests the existing principle may not be sufficient, for instance. Okay, so I finish on this this open window. We are proceeding to a third survey now to better understand on how people are aware of the fair principles, on what are the fair evaluation tools, what are they are using, and why, and how, and are people aware that they will be evaluated, because it's not often the case, and how do they feel about this evaluation. Are they aware of the evaluation tools and how they work, and what would have to happen to increase their level of comfort with being evaluated? So all these questions are in an ongoing work for the task force. That's all for me. I don't know if you hear me again.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Romain, for this presentation. And for summarizing the work that's been done in the task force, which is very interesting because it tackles not only the technical aspect, but also the social aspect of fairness assessment, which is one of the key for acceptance of these fair principles. Is there any question for Romain and related to the fair task force? I see not. I'm sorry, Romain, but you're one presentation away from lunch, and I think everybody is.
No worries. There is an invitation to come into the paper review committee that is open to everybody. So I invite you if you want to participate. It's a rich manner to participate and to ensure that your community is taken in account.
Mm-hmm. So if you send me the link, we'll forward it to the whole document and the community so that people are aware. Thank you, Romain. Next presentation is going to be on the EOSC Semantic Interoperability Task Force by Wolmar. So Wolmar, you have the floor. We can't hear you. You muted yourself.
All right, thank you. So now you should be able to hear me, and I did share my screen, so I hope you can see it. Fantastic. So I'm going to present the EOSC Semantic Interoperability Task Force, and I'm going to start with an introduction to what these task forces are and how they fit into this EOSC context. So EOSC is a vision and something that's being built more concretely. It's supposed to bring forward a web of fair data and services, and it's within the European context, the pilot action to deepen the new European research area for science, and then it's also the data space for research and innovation. The EOSC Association is an organization that has received a task to be the representative of the wider stakeholder community in research. So it has the role of being this community's voice, and it provides a strategic research and innovation agenda. It's a document that describes some of the important development activities around EOSC, and then it also produces a multi-annual roadmap. And the multi-annual roadmap contains some descriptions of challenges and things to address over the upcoming period, with the actions proposed on the European level, the national level, and on organizational or institutional level. So this task force is part of the EOSC Association's advisory structures. And they are tasked with giving advice on key areas of this implementation. So the task force is focused on specific topics, and it provides input then to the EOSC Association for these documents and also to its member organizations. And to the right here, you can see a listing of all the advisory groups and the subordinate task forces that are focusing on specific topics. So you just received a presentation from the Fair Metrics and Data Quality Task Force, and I represent the Semantic Interoperability Task Force. And for semantic interoperability, sorry about that, the current focus is to build on top of what's called the EOSC Interoperability Framework and implement some of the recommendations in that document, and also develop the recommendations to make sure that they have a deep connection to real research problems. So the task force is contributing to this web of fair data and services by addressing some of the semantic interoperability specific challenges, and semantic interoperability is described in a larger framework of interoperability aspects. So you have legal aspects, you have technical aspects, the semantic aspects, and then there's kind of intra-organizational aspects, and all of these needs to be addressed, and there's a lot of overlap between them, and this text is kind of a starting point with some technical reasoning and descriptions of how different components could work together to provide a solution. In the document, there's a set of recommendations, a brief set, and some challenges as well. And some things that we have picked up on in the task force is to work on looking at vocabularies and crosswalks and how they are encoded and exchanged within the research community. So looking at tools, workflows, and infrastructures. More specifically, we have also identified that we would like to look at catalogs for vocabularies and how to promote FAIR for these vocabularies as well. So they are available to the same degree as other data and research objects. And then the practical implementation of interoperability requires a lot of work, and looking at how this has been done in practice with connections to these theoretical frameworks is also a key aspect. In the work, we have organized ourselves to focus on bringing together synergies across actors and initiatives in the EOSC space. We are looking at thematic explorations with task force members who are interested and especially knowledgeable in certain topics to look into surveying the terrain, so to speak, of different of these aspects. We're also working with the strategic knowledge exchange among the task force members and also participating in communities and discussions like these. And the end goal is that we're going to converge on some sort of recommendations and perhaps publications that the wider community can rely on or reference when they implement interoperability solutions. So to represent the EOSC community and be the voice in a sense, we have a task force of 40+ members, and all of these are representatives of different member organizations and some beyond the EOSC Association as well. We have members who are part of many of the EOSC projects, so we hope to be able to tie together a well represented group of people. And the work is organized into smaller groups as we do our day-to-day collaboration. So we have metadata conventions as one of the topics, surveying the landscape of semantic interoperability and what it includes. And that's, for example, the applications of metadata standards and schemas and what kind of formalization languages are used. Then we have these semantic artifact catalogs that I already mentioned, and we look at the use cases and try to collect some interoperability case studies from the community. The survey of the interoperability landscape includes some definitions of terms, so we can agree on the basic implementation prerequisite, so to speak. So, for example, semantic artifact is something that has been defined by several people, I think, but the definition that we have chosen here is that it's a machine actionable and readable formalization of a conceptualization enabling sharing and reuse by humans and machines. These artifacts may have a broad range of formalization from loose sets of terms, taxonomies, thesauri, and higher order logics. This is a mouthful and it's not easy to digest. So I think we need to do some work on making this more readily available. And some of that will fit into kind of the wider context of interoperability recommendations and some minimal metadata set that could facilitate metadata interoperability and assessment. Inventory of tools and interoperability. These could be crosswalks, but other kinds of solutions to make semantic interoperability possible. And then also looking into some of the factors that tie into long-term sustainability. So it could be governance processes and examples of how to maintain semantic artifacts. The coordinators for this team are listed here. So it's Kurt Baumann and Milan Oystersek. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but if you want the contact details, you can refer to the presentation slides or contact me after this presentation. Another strand of work is surveying the landscape of semantic artifact catalogs. So places where these semantic artifacts are indexed for searching or hosted for storage. And there are many different floating around, and this strand of work aims towards kind of defining what a semantic artifact is or should be, and identifying some dimensions that could indicate its maturity, so you could choose a suitable location for your artifacts. And there's a literacy study in progress. They have reviewing both documents and publications, but also catalogs, examples of catalogs. And this is also coordinated by a group of people with Jan, Oscar Corjo, and Silvio Peroni. The third strand of work is looking at semantic interoperability from a journey perspective, and that is, for example, capturing case studies and use cases from the wider EOSC community. And then we aim to index these in a way that you can compare and contrast them across different domain-specific situations or organization-specific context, and also making sure that we have representation from the wider EOSC community, so that people can feel that the solutions that are presented for EOSC can actually be adopted and applies to them. And I'm the person coordinating this activity. So some examples of how these use cases can be used. So they can be used as a way of demonstrating value to different kinds of stakeholders. They can also be used by adopters of certain solutions to show concrete examples of how something has been put into practice. And then you can kind of fit it into your own context to do a similar adaptation of that solution. Builders can also use this to get a full picture of implementations or scenarios across many different domains. So it would give better implementations for the semantic interoperability solutions. And then the full collection of these kinds of journeys could also be a way for policymakers to make sure that we have comprehensive representation of different scenarios across different types and sizes of organizations and domains with more or less standard practices. And you can capture these journeys at different levels. So in the context of this work, we have defined case studies as something representing more or less real-world scenarios. So it's people working on certain types of solutions in a specific organization and describing the specific solutions that they have chosen. It could be tools, the artifacts, and so far that are in that specific situation. And these can be generalized into something we call use cases, and those could be business focused, describing the context or the actual problem that's being solved without giving details on how it's being solved. So focusing on the why and what. And then you could go into a more deeper level and describe use cases that are more task focused. So, I mean, how you would approach creating a semantic artifact, how you would approach making it available, I mean, fair to the wider community, and perhaps also discovery of semantic interoperability solutions of various kinds. And then to make this collection of case studies and use cases as usable as possible, it would make sense to try to find conceptual commonalities that could be used to compare and contrast them across the collection and help people identify some general trends that would be useful for people to support implementations and adoption. And in this work, we're also a little bit supported by examples from larger communities. One of them that I have had some support from is the Elixir community for data sharing in the life sciences. And I expect that there will be similar things for your community as well. So making sure that you have kind of representation of the different special interests across your community, defining kind of the sub-communities and what their stakes or needs are in relation to the different components of your ecosystem. So in this case, we have a plant sciences community, and they contribute to give perspectives on what they need in terms of tools, data, compute, resources, training, and interoperability, and so forth. And in Elixir, we have a maturity model for these communities. So they have a life cycle until they are considered mature and can give kind of good perspectives on these kinds of requirements. There's also examples of different EOSC initiatives that are collecting use cases at different levels, and these can provide support to implementers of interoperability solutions. So with that, I would like to say thank you. on behalf of the Semantic Interoperability Task Force for the invitation. And if you want to know more about our work or contribute, you can contact me or Oscar Corco. And you can see the email and contact information here.
Thank you very much, Wolmar. Thank you very much for presenting this, the work of the task force. I see there is a question for you.
Hello, thanks for the presentation. So, Silvia here. So, just to tell you, we in Onto Commons, we also have a task on interoperability, so I'm very much interested in collaborating with your work. And wanted to ask you what something we are asking also ourselves is like, so from the survey you did, do you see that people choose different solutions? So for sure, I mean, we see with they call things differently, like the way they define interoperability and the different levels is not unique. But so we see this heterogeneity. But do you also see different solutions, like different ways to solve interoperability, so that one has to make a decision, and if it goes down one way, is I don't know if it's clear, this question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're looking for, at least. I would also say that, I mean, when it comes to the survey, it's still in very early stages. We have received input from kind of our closest colleagues and colleagues of colleagues, but we haven't sent a wide survey yet, and that's in the works. So it will be sent out sometime during spring here, and when we get some more responses from that, I think we will have a wider perspective. The people who are working on this survey, I'm not involved, so I'm not really sure about the final results, and I would encourage you to either reach out to Kurt or to Milan to get some information about the current state of that work. But I mean, in general terms, I would suspect that there are differences in how people describe, I mean, what they put in the word semantic interoperability. I mean, just agreeing on that. And then, I mean, a vocabulary, what is that? And is these different levels of providing solutions. There is a need to converge on shared expressions, so you could have these informed discussions. And I don't think the task force should necessarily say that, I mean, this way of solving interoperability is better than that way of solving the interoperability, since we don't have the resources to do that deep levels of analysis. But we could at least try to untangle some of the confusion and describe, build on the existing interoperability framework and make it more clear that you're discussing the same things, or if you're discussing different things, so to speak.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you.
So thank you, Wolmar. I can actually give you a little bit more information on the survey because I'm part of it. So we're still in process, and we're planning to contact different projects and communities to actually get a sense of the different solutions to semantic interoperability. Because I think there are different levels of semantic interoperability that can be achieved with different levels of complexity. So the idea is to get a sense of what's out there, what are the solutions, because if you want to do recommendations, you need to know the landscape. So we are starting to do a landscape analysis. Another point that I would like to make is that within Onto Commons, there is the KEX workshops that are on regular basis. The next one is on May 4th. Where the idea is to exchange knowledge between the different projects that are present here and also the EOSC task force. So the Onto Commons project members are most welcome to join and listen. And the idea is that we're all working on the same realm. We're all doing something that are roughly similar. So instead of redoing the work that others are already doing, let's build on, you know, what's the existing and enrich each other, so that we can go faster. So that's the idea.
Thanks.
You're most welcome. Is there another question for Wolmar? Let me see. There is a question from Roy. This is for academic community, but is there any work done for commercial? potential commercial value implication for not having fair compliant interoperability. Maybe, Roy, if you want to just clarify your question.
Maybe I could give a short reflection, at least while he's typing his clarification. I mean, EOSC is aimed at research, and to support research, there will be commercial actors as well. So the EOSC ecosystem and the data space will be built in a way that the commercial services can announce what they offer to the science community. And there is a clear interest in making sure that the data spaces are interconnected, since a lot of research rely on information and standards from other communities. So, I mean, it's not maybe towards kind of the incentives here, but at least there is considerations for including industry in the EOSC ecosystem.
Thank you, Wolmar. Well, actually, EOSC is part of the grand vision from the European Commission on the digital market, right? So it's one of the data spaces dedicated to open science. And the link is made because, well, science is also an industry, right? You do research to actually build new products. So there is a sort of link that does not seem to be obvious, but I know that we're trying to make that link, and actually participating to this workshop is a way to actually link the thing. So thank you very much. If there's no other questions to Wolmar, I would like to then stop here. It's lunchtime. So we'll reconvene at 2:05 for 3 other presentations around activities on FAIR in EOSC. Well, for the people online, we're back in an hour. Enjoy lunch, and we're now going to lunch here in Berlin. So see you in an hour.